Hey, I'm Randy, and I'm the Cheap Audio Man. Here at the Cheap Audio Man, we don't feel like audio equipment, amps, speakers, decks, turntables, should cost more than a really nice snowblower that you can use to get rid of snow from your driveway and sidewalks. Even help out your neighbor. And these don't. What are these? These are the Meze Rai Solos, IEMs, earbuds. So grab a cup of coffee, sit down, and let's talk about the Meze Rai Solo. Today's sponsor is George's Global Pandemic Masks. When you want to have some fun and still maintain adherence to all your state, local guidelines for the horrible global pandemic, think about getting some George's masks. It's actually really hard to breathe in there. I now understand. Whew. Meze Rai Solos. Okay. This is an IEM. Currently $150. Okay. We're going to talk about the build quality, but first I'm going to give a disclaimer. This is an IEM that does things that I've never heard before and presents the music in a way that I've never experienced. It's not going to be for everybody, okay? But if you give it a chance, I think you will experience a lot of the music that you've listened to for your entire life in a completely different way. Let's talk about build quality. So build quality on these is absolutely fantastic. I have a few IEMs ranging in price from $50 all the way up to $170, $200, and this is far and away the best built IEM. The wire is at the top of the wire that goes into the actual earbud. It's basically bendable and will hold that position. So you can kind of put it in your ear, shape it around your ear, and get whatever you want. It's an MMCX connector, single-ended to a 3.5, very nice 90-degree, and very good badging and all that good stuff if that's something you care about. Now, with all that said, it does come with a whole bunch of silicone tips. It comes with a very nice, maybe a bit large case. I kind of like it because I can put my IEMs in there, and I can put my Ear Studio M100 Mark II in there as well. It's like a little man purse but it has awesome high fidelity experiences in there. A little system in your pocket. Okay, I would recommend you get some better ear tips. All right, personally I like foam. All right, you can get a little box of the foam ear tips for like $8 on Amazon. I'll link it in the description. Okay, so out of the park for build quality and a case and all that good stuff that it comes with. The cord's pretty good. A little thin, but I mean, it works just fine. I don't care. I don't get too excited about cords and stuff like that. Good news is you can change it out with any MMCX connector. You can also run them balanced if you get an MMCX to 2.5 millimeter, whatever you want. All right, let's talk about Soundstage and Imaging. Okay, for Soundstage and Imaging, I couldn't do like the traditional song. Well, I did do the traditional songs, but there's things I started picking up with this IEM that I'd never really heard before. And it really comes into layering of the music. Each layer, whether it be the vocals or the guitar or the different instruments, the drums, seem definitively separated from the rest of the music. Like Norah Jones, Come Away With Me. It was the best I've ever heard that song done before. It was her voice and then the guy doing the snare, the little fan on the snare drum. Everything was just separated and layered. Wherever I may roam. The right, all the way to the right. And I've never heard that before. Ho Hey by the Lumineers. It's the first time on an IEM, or headphone for that matter, that I've ever actually got a center image in front of me. Again, never experienced this before. It is can seem a bit fake at times, but other times it does not. And we'll get into that into the final thoughts. The bottom line is the imaging and soundstage on this IEM is the best that I've ever heard, or the most different that I've ever heard. I am going to categorize that as the best I've ever heard. It's phenomenal. It's so far and away different than any other IEM I've ever heard. It's amazing. All right. Let's talk about how they sound. Out of the box, these seemed not good. They sounded veiled, they sounded covered up, they sounded overtly bassy, just undetailed. I didn't care for them. But I soldiered on and I continued to let them burn in or break in or play. I use the Ear Studio M100 Mark II quite a bit, if not always, when I'm listening to IEMs. There's a 10-band parametric EQ in there, and I use it often. And the experience that I've had with some IEMs, like the Tin Hi-Fi P1, was initially I needed to EQ it. Not a lot, but I needed to EQ it. I needed to bring the bass up on this one, on the P1. On this one, I needed to bring down the bass. So basically 125 hertz down, 60, then 30. I brought it way down. And I brought 4K down, and then I brought 8K and 16K up quite a bit. So kind of like a S shape. Now, with that said, I got some detail back. I still heard some, I'll leave that for the mid-range, but that was where I got it to be where it's pleasing for me. And most of the time pleasing for me is pretty much flat, maybe a slight bump on the top end. And it sounded good, okay? Now, over time, when I continued to listen to it, I found the need to EQ it less and less. Now, that could be one of two things, or two of two things. It could be, number one, the drivers were breaking in. Number two, my brain was burning into the sound signature. I'd say the truth is probably in the middle somewhere, probably a little bit of both. With all that said, I am running them now with a flat EQ. Now, this morning, I did bring down 125, I don't know, maybe 2 dB, and I brought down 4K about 2 dB, and that to me gave me kind of better detail in the mid-range and in the treble. So bass out of the box is full, okay, and thick, and I'd say it's maybe a little too thick around the 125 hertz area, okay? But again, after I'd listened to these for a while, it was fine. It was good. It was good, and I could appreciate it. Bass is, there's a lot of it, right? Mids, I feel like, are very well balanced while maintaining great detail in male vocals and female vocals. I used most of the same things. I used Wherever I May Roam. I used Dumb by Nirvana. I used Uninvited by Alanis Morissette. I will say when I used Shoot to Thrill, and that's one of my go-to mid-range songs, the initial guitar seemed way far back. And that's one of the things about this IEM, is it doesn't necessarily veil certain frequencies. What it feels like it's doing is it's putting them way back in the soundstage or way forward in the soundstage. And I've never quite heard that before on any piece of equipment. So for vocals, initially there was a lot of resonances at the upper registers of male vocals. And there still is a little bit. that has calmed down quite a bit the more time I've spent with these. There's going to be a reoccurring theme here, and I'll get into it in the final thoughts. Overall, there's nothing in here that I'm like, nothing. From the pure sound perspective. Except for the resonances and the voices sometimes, and it's not all the time. That's another thing about this IEM. It's different. What are my final thoughts? Final thoughts on the Meze Rai solo is it's the most spectacular IEM I've ever heard. At $150, I think it is probably the most highest recommendation I can make for a product, if you understand what you're getting yourself into. Okay? So you need to break these in for a long time. Please, you're not going to get the full experience and the truest experience unless you've burned them in for a while and or listen to them for a while. Because if it's burn brain in, then just listen to them for a while. But it's not just burn brain in. You gotta break them in. All right. Some songs, and I will say, like the Metallica Black Album, did not sound good on these. It seemed far away and not detailed. Other songs, like a lot of stuff by Mumford & Sons, Come Away With Me by Norah Jones, the best I've ever heard it. And not by like a little bit, like it was moving. This IEM can and will give you a more immersive experience with headphones or IEMs than any other headphone or IEM out there. Okay? It seems like it almost exaggerates how the song was recorded. If it was recorded really well, then it sounds phenomenal. If it was not recorded well, and I never really thought that the Metallica Black Album wasn't recorded well, I just think it was bumped on the bass and the tops. It doesn't sound great. It doesn't sound great at all. So it's dependent on the material a lot of the times. Now, don't be dissuaded from getting these, because 75-85% of the time it sounds phenomenal. It gives you a presentation that I've never heard before. 10-15% of the time you're going to be underwhelmed and kind of like, ugh, I don't like this. So the best way that I can summarize this IEM is that occasionally, sometimes, it's going to do things and present the music in a way that is unpleasant. The majority of the time, it is going to provide an immersive musical experience that you've probably never had before. It does things that I've never experienced. At $150, this could be your only IEM. It may disappoint you if you've heard some other IEMs and you're just looking for that traditional musical experience. If you want something that's immersive, that you've never heard before, at $150, I just don't think you can go wrong. They're pretty low sensitivity, so you can run them off of a phone. However, I would look to get something that has a better DAC, like the Ear Studio, like, I don't know, Dragonfly Red or Black. But more importantly, I would get something that has an EQ, or that at least you have the functionality for EQ. I know on an iPhone you can use, the Spotify has a built-in EQ. Android phones, you're good to go. There's an EQ that you can use on everything. So this is a pretty spectacular little item at $150. But bear in mind, it's not going to do everything right all the time. But when it does do things right, it completely covers up any inadequacies that it has on any other songs. So if you're new here, consider subscribing. We have a whole bunch of videos. If you want to support the channel, Patreon links in the description. You can use any of my links to purchase things, or you could sign up for Amazon Music HD for free. Click on the link, scroll down to the bottom, click Try HD. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.